Hello. Welcome to the show. I'm Val, and I'm so excited because today I am going to be talking to Nathan here. And Nathan, you are a man of many talents. You are an artist, a director, a producer, a wearer of hats, which I noticed in the documentary, which I love. And you're wearing a really fun one right now. But we are going to talk about your new documentary that I actually have watched twice now, and it's called Bright Spark: The Reconciliation of Trevor Southey. And I have to say, I watch a lot of documentaries. I'm a film critic, so I watched about 700 films last year. And I'm getting ready for the Sundance Film Festival next week, where I'm going to watch 25 movies in like 8 days. And documentaries is one of my favorite genres. That's why I went to film school. I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. And living in Utah, I get to see a lot of films based on Utah, things that are going on in Utah, religion being one of the big ones. And so when I got kind of the email about your documentary, I'm going to be realistic. I was a little hesitant on whether I was going to like it, because I don't know if you have seen this, but a lot of times when you see a documentary that has some religious history, usually it's very one-sided. So you're going to get either like, it's so amazing, or we hate it. And what I found very refreshing about this documentary that made me want to watch it again is that you are very well balanced in the storytelling in this documentary, not only about Trevor, which is very important, but there are so many different facets of religion and art and Utah and being outside of Utah, and the families and personalities that go into his life, but also are related to religion. So tell us why it was so important for you to tell this story, but also tell it in such a very balanced way.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for watching it in the first place, and then for inviting me to be on the show this morning. And you've really hit on something that for me as a storyteller and an artist has always been something that I've really emphasized in my work. And that is, I've always been interested in the idea of having art be something that is evocative rather than provocative. I think that's low-hanging fruit. I think it's pretty easy to make something. I think it's easy to make people upset.
Yeah, especially right now.
Especially right now. And that actually is the big thing. And I'll get to this in a second. One of our big challenges in that. But, you know, a mantra for me as a filmmaker, and I was very fortunate in my co-director, Matt Black, to find a creative partner who was also interested in nuance and not in black and white storytelling. So our mantra was very much that we wanted to start conversations and not end a conversation. We were never out with this film to prove anyone wrong. And I mean, we've got some issues that, especially in Utah, we've got some hot button issues, right? If you want to bring up religion, homosexuality, gay marriage, it's people sort of expect an argument.
Right.
They expect you to come in and say, and try to prove a point, prove them wrong, or prove somebody right. And they either, especially movies that focus around the LDS Church, there are sort of two ways that we see that. And it's either this sort of, you know, here's this, it's this glorious answer and inspiration, or people want blood on the floor. They want to see, you know, they want to see the church as the bad guy. And the church is first of all, religion is so complicated. And the reality of it is, it's full of joy and pain and a lot of complicated ideas. And so it makes a really good character
Yeah.
in a film if you can let it be that, if you can let it be play that role, that complicated role. So that's what we wanted to do here, and I'm thrilled that that's what you got out of it, that you're seeing that nuance, and you're seeing just that approach to things. But as I alluded to, that's been the complication, because people expect a fight, and so it's been very difficult to pitch this story to first of all, investors. As you know, films are very expensive. So, but getting someone to say, when we say, hey, this is what the story we're trying to tell, people would be like, I don't know, because they don't know where we're going to come out.
Right.
It's risky. It's much more of a sure bet if you can say, hey, we're going to go after the church. Then you've got all sorts of people who are like, oh yeah, here's all the money you want. Or we're going to make a movie that where the church is the hero. You know, there's good funding for that. Making a movie like this, that's why it took 11 years.
It was very human. There were a lot of times in this film where each different person said, we're flawed.
Yeah.
The church is flawed.
Yeah.
Art is flawed. Just us as humans, we are flawed. There is no perfect. And I really loved that. So let's get into Trevor and who Trevor Southey is. So tell us a little bit about Trevor, because I think I learned so much from this documentary. I have lived in Utah since I was in first grade, from Colorado, brought here being raised as a Catholic.
Oh, wow.
In a Utah, in a predominantly LDS Mormon place. And I honestly didn't understand what religion was until I came here. I thought everyone went to the same place on Sunday. I thought, okay, there's just a bunch of different places, but we all are listening to the same thing. We all believe the same things. We all go have donuts after mass, I thought it was all the same. And I came here and very quickly as a first grader, understood that it was not the same thing. Right. And so I've grown up in an element that some people would just expect me to be a hater.
Pardon the interruption.
Sorry.
Teachers,
oh,
just a reminder.
That's okay. This is real life, right?
That's what happens.
So life during the pandemic. Yeah. But walking around Utah as of now, and I consider myself a Utahn. I do understand that there's so many beautiful things I have looked at in this city, both on church property and off church property, that Trevor has been involved in. And I had no idea who the person was behind all of these beautiful things I have seen in Utah. So let's jump in who Trevor is and a few of the things that he's contributed to us, and then why you decided to get involved in this story.
Quick apology just for the announcements. I helped start a school a few years ago. I mean, many years ago now, and I had to slip out of the studio for a moment to talk to you. So
no worries. Don't apologize for starting a school.
But just to go into that story, I think part of why I love this story was that I think I wanted people to we started out by telling the story of the artist, but we've got that little section where just to point out, hey, these guys, you're more part of this story than you realize, because you've seen Trevor's work in maybe the University of Utah Hospital, or the airport, or maybe any number of places. And so they're a part really of our cultural experience in a way that I think a lot of times we take that for granted, right? We drive past a sculpture that we see every day on the way to work, or something downtown, and we don't think of that, what went into the creating of that piece of art. So I love exploring those sort of cultural roots of the city a little bit through these artists. But my interest also in Trevor's story, and in this particular group of artists, was my own growing up. I grew up as a Mormon kid, and I never even thought of art as a career option. I'd met a few of these artists when I was young, and in the film, I talk about that. I met Trevor, excuse me, when I was, or my parents were friends with Trevor and Elaine, his wife at the time, before I was born. So I remember meeting him as a child. So, but I think, as we're talking about cultural roots, the options I felt as a young Mormon kid were much more traditional career options. You can be a doctor or an attorney or an entrepreneur, but there's not a lot of support for, oh yeah, you want to be an artist. That's a great idea. But I love to draw and I love to make things. And so I would look to Trevor and then eventually these other artists for some advice. Okay, I'm interested in doing art, and as a young Mormon, I thought art that has to do with the church, right? I felt this sort of, first of all, it feels so decadent to even think about being an artist. It's sort of like going to play every day, and I think I thought you're supposed to sort of, I don't know, maybe there's this sort of Puritan quality that still sticks with us. That's like, you're supposed to hate your job, right? So,
right. Oh, I know. I watch movies and talk on the radio for a living. So like, it doesn't feel like work to me. And I feel a little guilty that I really love what I do.
Oh, good. So you've got some of that Catholic guilt. Good job.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
As long as you feel a little guilty, I think that's good fuel. But so as I became an artist, I would look to these other artists and say, hey, how did you make this work? First of all, how do you find this balance between, I was dealing with this conflict. First of all, I came from Salt Lake City and I went to Swarthmore College, which is this tiny little Quaker college outside of Philadelphia, where the entire basis of that institution was this very liberal arts, open-minded deconstruction of everything. So I came from this tradition of putting things in neat little packages and boxes and making sure that you had the right answer. And then I leapt into this, or was sort of thrown into, although it was by choice, this environment that was all about just tearing that apart and trying to figure out why and what it meant. And so art, and that's where I decided to become an artist. And so art for me became about, first of all, it was beauty. I loved the beauty of painting. But then there was also an element of looking and finding a different way to see something, and ways of seeing became really intriguing to me. And so anyway, that sort of informed why I would go to these artists, because then I would ask them, well, how do I reconcile this thing I understand as art, which is exploring and pulling apart and finding a new angle, and a story that goes a specific direction.
Yeah, it goes a very specific direction. So Trevor is an artist, lived in Utah, did the very traditional Mormon Utah things. He got married.
Right.
He had kids.
Yep.
His ex-wife is very LDS.
Yep.
And you talk about this in the film, and I think you talk about it specifically with the Mormon religion, but I do feel it pertains to almost every religion, where you're either in the religion or you've stepped outside of it. We have people where we call, we're part-time Catholics. We go on Easter, Christmas, whatever.
Right.
And in Utah growing up here, it was like, okay, you've got Mormons, you've got Jack Mormons, you've got people that are excommunicated, and people that just aren't sure. And I think with every religion, especially when you grow up in a territory that is predominantly one, you feel the sense of, you have to do this if your family is in that religion. And Trevor felt like he had to, but he also says a few times in the film that he felt like when he joined the LDS Church, a little bit of an older age. I mean, he was still fairly young, but it wasn't like as a child.
Yeah, but sort of college age,
Yeah,
right?
college age, that he felt like he was going home, that this was a home for him. And I think anybody that's been involved in religion, there are moments in that where you feel like you are at your best, where you are at home, where you feel like this is something that is uplifting you into a different place. And then some of us have the moment where we feel like maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe I didn't see what I see now. And, Trevor was married 3 kids in, and he said, I don't think this is the right thing for me to be married. I'm a gay man.
Right.
And he made a huge, hard decision to leave his marriage. He was excommunicated from the church. But his art is all over the church, right? It's all over Utah. And so how do you excommunicate a person that has had such, has touched so many lives in this way? Like, how does that happen, It's very hard. There were a few moments in the film where I got emotional. And I think that's the best kind of documentary, whether you're either elated and happy, you're excited, you're scared. And in this case, I got a little teary because there was a moment where his ex-wife, Elaine, is talking about Trevor and their daughter, and they're living in California.
Yeah.
And his daughter's name is still registered in the church, but she hadn't been there in a while. He had been very well removed from the church. They were both experiencing some health troubles, and the local, I don't know, what would you say, church community?
Yeah, the local ward.
The local ward recognized this, and they started taking care of them. And his ex-wife was just so emotional that I got emotional. My ex-mother-in-law, who I call my bonus mom, is LDS because she was my mom for 20 years. She doesn't stop being my mom after a divorce. She's LDS, and her and I talk a lot about religion. And I do feel like the LDS Church is very community oriented, especially here in Utah. I mean, we're the #1 volunteer state.
Right. Absolutely.
In the United States usually, and it mostly because of what that religion has brought to us as a community here. So sharing that moment, it was a very real moment because, you could easily say, he should have left. Like and he shouldn't have gone back, and they were horrible to him and they just abandoned him.
Right.
But people are still people, and we still have human tendencies. And that was a very human moment.
Well, and that moment is, I mean, first of all, I think you've hit on a couple of really important elements of the story. And one of them is being trusted with the story of people who are very much with us, and telling that story on a big screen is, to be trusted with that is a tremendous honor. And to have Elaine, first of all, be willing to have that conversation, and then to trust us with putting it out there for everybody to see is overwhelming. And one of the greatest honors of creating this story and telling this story is having the families thank me for that. And Elaine said, I was nervous. As you can imagine, I was nervous sitting in the theater. I got to show the families, and sitting in the theater with Elaine and having her, I was watching it through her eyes. I swear, that screening. And she came up afterwards and she said, I said, well, what did you think? And she said, it was very painful, but you did an excellent job. And I want to thank you for being true to our story. And that, I mean, holy cow, to have that sense of have the trust, I guess, to have held up to that trust and have lived up to our part of it. I was thrilled. But then the other part that you mentioned was also the story of this group of artists in the church who weirdly the experience with having a sort of dealing with Mormonism and homosexuality goes back before the story even started with Dennis Smith. And Dennis had this experience as a Mormon missionary in Denmark, where he taught a man about the church who ended up being baptized, who was gay. And to Dennis, this was long before the church was really involved in this conversation in any sort of a public way. But this guy asked Dennis, and as he was learning about the church, is this something that is okay? And Dennis he spent a couple of days reading everything he could, for church literature, his scriptures. And his conclusion was, well, if God loves all of his children equally, well, then of course it's okay. So he went back and happily passed this on to this young man who ended up joining the church. And so, but Dennis at that moment sort of became just very open-minded to this idea and became an advocate. So when he met Trevor years later, it was not a question for him of whether or not Trevor was right or wrong. It was just, Trevor's a great guy and he's my friend and he's an artist. And so that is part of what I loved about this story is here this group of friends, and they become Trevor's advocates, and they're the ones who help him to be true to himself the way he feels he needs to, and to have that integrity, which means losing everything. But fortunately not them. Mm-hmm. They were there and continued to be there through this process. So I loved, and I've talked about this a little bit before, not with you, but this idea that in a way through the art, they overcame this sort of bright lines of separation that religion draws for us, right? And even if we're taught to love other people or to pray for other people, they're defined as other, right? They've been othered, right? And so there's a separation. And that was a remarkable part of this story. And so that's part of what I wanted to convey. I wanted it to feel like we can all care about these people, see their struggle, their pain, their joy, without without pushing it one way or the other.
Well, and it does, I don't want it to seem like the conversation is all flowers and rainbows in the documentary. No. because it's not. And that's why I kept watching, honestly. And there are moments because, let's think about it for a minute. Trevor, he changed 4 other people's lives forever, his ex-wife and his 3 children.
For sure.
He made choices to have that life.
Right.
And, I have gone through a divorce and it was devastating.
Yeah.
But to think about going through a divorce in this manner, like not only are you losing your husband, your best friend, which they both stated, their best friend,
very much.
the person that you built this life with, the person that you thought was very close in the same beliefs as you. Losing someone in the same belief system can also be very traumatic. And she has every right. His ex-wife has every right to be angry with him.
Oh, yeah.
And you see a little bit of that. I think it's more hurt, that she's still very hurt.
It's a sense of betrayal.
Yeah, because she said, he made these decisions.
Sure.
She did say something in it, and it was a little bit of a trigger for me. I'm not going to say what it is because I really want people to watch it. She said some things that triggered me, that you, in the filmmaking style, left a moment for thought after she said a few of these very hard things. But then you brought it around on why she believes those things and why she thinks those things. Um, and and I just thought it was very thoughtful, because whether you are religious or not, this is a very human situation for both of them. He
Yeah.
needed to be himself. He
Right.
felt like he had no other choice. She felt like he had a lot of choices. And so they both kind of felt like this was just this stopping point, but also a new beginning point.
Right.
But the fact that they remained in each other's lives, when he needed her, she was there.
Yeah.
Um,
Amazing.
it was just, to me, I feel like that's not something we see a whole lot of. You know, we always are shown people get divorced or separated for whatever reason, and they just go through, and I'm sure there were a lot of struggles, like a lot of struggles.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, you know, the father of your children, she takes care of him at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah.
You know, whatever her hurt was. And I would like that to be a little more normalized, because I want to do that as well. You
Yes.
know, like there
Yeah.
are things I'm hurt about with my
Sure.
ex-husband, but I feel like we should normalize that. So by the time I got to the end of the documentary, I didn't feel like this was a religious documentary at all. I felt like
Perfect.
it was a documentary on human behavior, and how we treat each other, and that we don't have to treat each other the way that we think we do. You know what I mean? The way that we're
Perfect.
told, and
Perfect.
do I dare use the word indoctrined?
Right.
The way that we're
Sure.
indoctrined. There, you make your own rules, and
Sure.
there are a lot of stories in your story that share people that are both in the faith and out of the faith, that have created their own way to it. And
Yeah.
I really liked that there
Well,
were
I
no
love that. And again, I'm so happy to hear that that came through. One of our very first test audiences, when we had this rough assembly of this story, was the Seattle Documentary Society, which is where my my co-director was living at the time. And so he was a member up there of this society, and we said, hey, let's do a screening and just see what what people think. They have no Mormon connection. They have no art connection. They don't know any of these people. It's sort of an innocent eye test. And because we're not trying to make a Mormon movie
Yeah.
or a religious movie. So we showed them, and then there's a screening process up there, a procedure. And what you do is you roll the film, and then they have a half-hour discussion where the filmmakers are not allowed to say anything.
Oh.
You just have to sit. You just have to sit and listen.
Are you
to
sweating
whatever.
at that moment? Are you a lot
Absolutely,
of sweat?
absolutely. So you roll it, and then you just kind of sit there, and you sit on your hands, and you try to, and you. Well, I was madly writing things down. I was taking notes. But the very first thing. Oh, we did. Oh, you know what? We were allowed to give them a couple of questions that we want them to pose. Like, how did you feel like it was accessible to someone who had no Mormon background? And I think that was actually might have been after the half hour. Anyway, the first thing that they said in the response, the very first hand that went up, was this woman who said, "You have in this story what you think you have."
Oh, wow.
And that was awesome.
Yeah.
And then they went on to talk about, someone said, I come from a Jewish background. I'm totally disconnected from my faith. I'm not practicing. I just identified with this story. I saw in Trevor, my uncle, or I saw this same sort of question. I felt like it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether he was religious or not. It's a story of people coming to terms with how their roots inform who they become, and what they allow to happen, I guess, and what they feel like has to happen. and that wrestling match, because we all have it. I mean, I joked with a friend of mine years ago, like, well, it could be a question of like, well, how do I become a Jewish accountant? How do I become a Mormon artist? I don't know. We all wrestle with something, right? We all try to have to figure out how to make sense of where we ended up from where we started.
Well, I absolutely enjoyed the film. I have to say that I do think everyone should watch this documentary. I don't often say that. Sorry. I'm a lover of films. I'm not one of those people that goes in hating. I go in excited, and with this, because it's about art, which I love. It's about religion, which fascinates me. But mostly, like you said at the beginning of this interview, this is a film that starts a conversation. And it's an important conversation because it's not just about one thing. And I think it's relatable to so many people, whether you, again, are in the religion, out of the religion. And I do think, I mean, I want to watch it with my bonus mom. And so that, because I would like to have these conversations, and I know we're both going to cry at the same parts. But, it's so great visually just to see so many things as the artist, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, that sculpts the girl that we see downtown, the sculpture of the girl
Dennis.
playing. Dennis.
Yeah, that's Dennis
sorry.
Smith.
So Dennis Smith, who he's sculpting that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have seen that sculpture a million times. Like I think for us, watching it from Salt Lake City, whether you live here or you've been here, there's going to be some things that trigger you visually, which is why I love art so much. And this is as much about art as it is about religion, as it is about Trevor's life. And so I would say check it out. It's going to be exclusively in theaters, in Megaplex theaters, which I love my friends at the Megaplex, starting tomorrow. And so you can get your tickets, have conversations. This video will be up on all of the Facebook pages. So feel free to put your comments, questions here so that we can read them. And Tracy just chimed in. He said, excited to see this one. So Tracy, I'm excited to have a conversation with you about this one. So yes, please go see it. And Trevor, anything else you want to say to everyone before we head out today?
All right. Sorry, I had to mute for a second. We had an announcement happening in the background here. But sorry, so was there a question I'm responding to?
I said, is there anything else you want to tell everyone about the film, about you, about Trevor, anything before we head out today?
Yeah, thank you. I think coming to this also from not being a filmmaker, I probably approached it in a way that is different than a filmmaker would. One of the things that's important to me in creating one of my paintings is that I make a painting. I have an idea of what I want, and I'll have some, I'll have it sort of composed. I might even have sketches made for it or something I've kind of mocked up in Photoshop. But if I end up with the exact painting I thought I wanted, it's not good.
Right.
and it's only in responding to the painting as it changes that it becomes a sort of a living thing or a, something that communicates. And I think through this long process of making the film, it turns out I make films the same way. It changed and evolved as we went. And I think, any true documentary will do that. And this one had some completely surprising twists and turns to us, where we were forced into making decisions that we thought, well, I don't know how we're going to solve this.
Which is the best. That is the best when you jump into something, especially telling a story. That's the best problem to have. So
yeah, it was awesome.
It was awesome. A pleasure, and I can't wait to see what else you have coming, if anything.
Well, thank you.
Please let us know. And everyone, again, you can go go to Megaplex, any Megaplex theater, and see this Bright Spark, The Reconciliation of Trevor Southey. And I would say, even before or after, like, Google him. I was so impressed with him and his story, and how many branches it leads out to in our community. Just so many other stories you could tell just from his story.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I would invite you also, Val, to come to, I show my paintings at Modern West Fine Art, and come by. We'll give you a gallery tour, and you can
would love that.
See what I really do.
Well, I think you really do both of these things very well.
Well,
so
thank you
so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see everyone else later. We'll talk about some more movies next week. Sundance is coming, so you're just going to see me every single day for the next 2 weeks right here. B98.7 Movies That Make Us and What to See with Val. Go check out whattoseewithval.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.